y soy Latinx.
Al usar Latinx, estamos haciendo que las mujeres y los hombres tengan el mismo nivel y no sean diferentes ni más uno ni más otro. En nuestra comunidad latina o Latinx tenemos muchas palabras que son en el masculino y cuando nos referimos a un grupo de personas que son hombres y mujeres, siempre estamos reconociendo a los hombres y nunca a las mujeres.
I totally have to make a video about this. As many of you might already know, judging from my last video, I like to talk. A lot. And when I came across this whole Latinx thing, I knew I had to make a video about it because I can't go a day without ranting alone in my room for 45 minutes. So, before I start talking about this, I think it's important to clarify that I am Hispanic, Latino, however you Americans like to refer to us. Maybe some of you already know because of my somewhat shitty English, but yeah, I'm from Venezuela, the happiest country in the world, with the highest criminal rates and one of the lowest salaries on the continent. Yay. But that's a whole thing that maybe I'll talk about in another video. Going back to the Latinx drama, I think I have to give some Spanish lessons in order for you English speakers to get why this term infuriates me, and most of the Hispanic community. Doing some research, I found that this word was invented by Hispanic American groups that came to the conclusion that Spanish is somehow inherently sexist, even though most of them don't even know how to speak Spanish to begin with. And don't get me wrong, if you were born in the States and you have Hispanic parents and you like to call yourself Hispanic too, even though you've never been to Europe or Latin America for a fair amount of time, and you don't even speak the language that, would give you that label in the first place, I couldn't care less about that. People can identify however they want, and I am nobody to tell them what they can or can't say about themselves. Where I draw the line, however, is when they try to change and even look down on Hispanic culture just because they don't understand it. And most of that misunderstanding comes from them looking at Hispanic culture through the lens of American culture. And no, eating Taco Bell or celebrating Dia de los Muertos with Halloween decorations and only knowing how to say puta, caliente, and fiesta doesn't make you any more Latino. That is quite an offensive and shallow stereotype created by Americans for Americans.
I didn't ask to be born Latina. No más chiva suerte.
And it's honestly sad that a lot of people there have this whitewashed view of what being a Latino is, and they don't even realize it. It's not even the stereotype thing that makes me mad, because trust me, other countries also have stereotypes about Americans. It's the white savior complex that I don't like. It's the we know better, therefore let us change everything vibe that honestly pisses me off. As you heard at the beginning of the video, a lot of these people had one class of Spanish grammar, and they already conclude it's sexist because when you have a group of girls, you refer to them as ellas, and if one dude joins the group, you have to start saying ellos. For those who don't know, ellas is feminine and ellos is masculine. And here is where I make my case. These people have no idea of how Spanish actually works, because if they did a little research, they'd find out that Spanish doesn't work like English. You can't compare how the two languages use gender because they are fundamentally different. For example, English is a mostly neutral language. This means that you only use gender when it comes to actually referring to someone's identity. If you refer to someone as she, her, she's most likely a girl, and if you refer to someone as he, him, he's most likely a dude. Simple, right? Well, Spanish does not work like that. Almost every word, except for verbs and some other tiny exceptions, have a gender. This means that this, in English, would be a table, the table, which is neutral, but in Spanish, this would be la mesa, which is feminine, and this would be el carro, which is masculine. We are not saying the table identifies as a girl or the car identifies as a boy, or that any of them have any sense of self in order to do so. And this takes me to my first Spanish lesson of the video. We have two types of gender. The one that's literal, therefore the same as the English one, and the one that only exists as a linguistic mechanism, which doesn't exist in English, and this is why a lot of you are very confused. And now you might be asking, well, how do I tell the difference if they are phonetically the same? It's all about context. If you're talking about an object, you're safe to assume it's not a literal gender. But if you're talking about a living, breathing thing, human or animal, it gets a little trickier. If you refer to them in singular, such as tu gato, which translates to your cat, if the cat is female, you could say tu gata, if you want to talk about her in particular. But if you refer to her as tu gato, it would still be correct, because the plural for the species is gato. Therefore, the gata is also a gato at the same time. This means that the word gato, even though it's always masculine, can have a literal gender if you use it as a singular, and a subjective gender if you use it as a plural to refer to the whole species, regardless of the fact that it is the same word all the time. I think at this point you're starting to understand why it is way more complex than it sounds, why context is so important in Spanish, and most importantly, why you can't compare English to other languages and vice versa. Now, let's do a feminine example. Zebra, which translates to zebra, is a feminine word in Spanish, but that doesn't mean all zebras are female. Same goes to pantera, mariposa, suricata, libélula, araña, ballena, and so on. There are some cases when the species and the singular gendered words are all different, which is the case with chicken. All chicken are pollos, which is a masculine word. But if a pollo is male, you refer to it as a gallo, and if it's female, it's a gallina, but they are still both pollos. In most of the cases, the word for the species tends to be phonetically the same as one of the gendered ones, and you have to tell the difference by the context, such as the gato example I already gave. So, I think that's enough from our visit to the zoo. Let's start talking about humans now. A lot of people, even some Spanish native speakers that don't know how it works in an objective level, think it's sexist that some of our species words are masculine, such as hombre, which literally translates to man, or humano. You can use any of those words as a plural for all humanity. But they forget about persona, which is feminine, or humanidad, which is also feminine. But again, neither of those genders matter. They are the same as la mesa or el carro as far as they are not referring directly to one individual. And this same logic applies to ellos and ellas, todos and todas. You don't have to say todos y todas if you want to include everyone. If you say todos, you're already talking about all people, regardless of the subjective gender of the word alone. And this takes me to my next point. If you think there should be a gender-neutral term specifically for non-binary people, I could get behind that. But in that case, I don't know, at least make it pronounceable for Spanish speakers? And that's precisely the next problem I have with this term. It's supposed to define a group of people that can't even use it in their language. Latinx is a word that is only usable in English. How more white savior can you get than that? And the people that did it are allegedly not even white. Ugh. Latine would be a better option since it's at least pronounceable for Spanish speakers, but notice how I said Latine and not Latines. This term only makes sense in singular because it's the only case where gender is actually literal, because the plural for Latino is Latinos. A non-binary person is Latino as a group, regardless of the gender of the word, because that's how Spanish works, and that is not discriminating against anyone. We are all Latinos. Doesn't matter if you're a girl, a non-binary person, or a boy. Spanish is not an inherently sexist language, and nobody gets to say it is just because it's not the same as English. A lot of the people that defend this term also tend to claim they are so woke and protective of other cultures and yet insult other cultures if they don't resemble the American archetype. most of these people also tend to use the argument of Hispanic people being transphobic and therefore hating the term. And I am not even going to debate that. There is a lot of transphobia in South America, way more than North America at least, but the dislike for this term goes way beyond that. It feels like they are using trans people as a shield, like Nikita Dragun, for example. She's a very problematic person, and when people criticize her, people say it's transphobic. As far as you respect her pronouns and address her as a woman, you are not being transphobic. She shouldn't be immune to criticism just because she's trans. I've even came across people saying Spanish is not relevant because it's the language of the conquerors. And they dare to say that in English. That is literally self-explanatory. I don't even think I have to say anything. Once they learn how to speak any native South American language and they are able to say that sentence again, maybe I'll start entertaining the idea of respecting these people more. And not even then, because Hispanic culture is what it is today because of all the cultural exchange we had with Europe. And yes, we still have natives, but the culture we find pride in today is totally born from colonialism, Black culture, Asian culture, and all the different ethnicities that contributed throughout our history, just as any other country or group of countries that had a similar beginning, such as, I don't know, the States? Anyways, that would be all for today's video. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and be kind to everyone in the comment section. Bye.
Missing someone. Missing someone. Missing someone.